All right, so now that we know what Liferay is, we know the use case that we're going to be working with here, let's talk about what a Liferay user is. A Liferay user is essentially an entity that can interact with the platform in some way. Okay, so the way that works is you have a user account, and the user account is given certain access depending on their role. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at here with our particular role. A role at a high level is comprised of permissions, which will determine what actions can be taken on which Liferay resources. So by default, users are given a user role. It's an actual role in Liferay that just gives them basic access to the control menu and their own user account. Okay. We'll talk about roles and permissions in more detail later, but that's what gives us, practically speaking, the Liferay user. All right, now there are a couple of ways to manage users in Liferay. There is the management through organizations and management through user groups. Now, organizations are going to be representative of a real life hierarchy. Okay, so in a company, for example, you might have a top level organization and then departments within the organization. Okay, so Livingston Hotels and Resorts, for example, an organization structure here might be the Livingston Hotels and Resorts organization and then the actual individual hotels and resorts that we have across the world. Okay, and by doing this, you can organize your users logically, okay, based on the actual structure. So each hotel or resort in this case would have their own management, have their own staff, and those users would be organized logically within that hierarchy. Now there's also the ability to group users through what are called user groups. And user groups allow you to take users and group them into specific groupings that transcend the organization structure. So the example I just gave, if we had the Livingston Hotels and Resorts organization structure, and we had our different hotels and resorts represented as different organizations, a user group in that case might be all of the managers from all of the different hotels. So I could create a hotel manager user group. All of my managers throughout the organization structure would go in that user group. And there's also some more specific things you can do with user groups, giving them pages and roles to work with as well. All right, so that's the different ways in general that you can organize your users. We'll come back to that in more detail in a little bit. But when creating users, what we can do is we can create them in the control panel. So again, that's going to be in the menu and in that control panel at the top there. There's a users and organizations section where we can create our individual user accounts. When an account is created, of course, you'll need to fill out their basic information, things like name, screen name, email address. You can add some other information in there as well, but those are going to be the things that are required. And you also have the ability to give them some additional information. Okay, so there's identification information. You could place them in an organization. You could place them in a user group. Give them another role apart from the user role, which is that default role that I mentioned before. So for example, if we want to create a user account for Omar Miles, we might want to give him a special role because we know that he is the primary one responsible for curating content for the Livingston Life site. So if we had that special role, we can give that to him, and that would give him additional access to essentially perform his job functions. That can be done in the user account. That can be done elsewhere as well, which we'll talk about when we discuss roles in more detail. We can also do things like add user images. We can give them a password, etc., etc. So let's just go ahead and recap that real quick. Okay. So a Liferay user is an entity that can interact with the platform. Practically, that's done through the user role, and we can, of course, give them additional roles as well to give them the access they need to perform their actual job functions. All right. They are created and managed in the control panel in that user and organization section, and they can be organized in a hierarchical structure of an organization or within a user group, which transcends the organization structure. Again, we'll go into some of this information in more detail in later sections, but for now what we're going to do is we're going to actually create Josiah Copeland's account, and we're going to log in with him as an administrator. So that means we need to create his account, we need to give him the administrator role, and then we'll go ahead and log in and use his platform administrative privileges to perform the rest of the functions throughout the course. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay. All right, so what we're gonna do in the next section is we're gonna go ahead and create a little, edit. Hold on.